Once again today, like we've seen across the country and like we saw in our city last week, we saw ICE agents, federal agents, show up in our city unannounced and come to create havoc in our community. There's no other way to put it, to create chaos and to create havoc and to stir up havoc in our community. I'm going to share a timeline of events as I understand them, and please do understand that this is rapidly evolving and there are a whole lot of details to understand, and we're going to have to get kind of a further accounting of some of those things as we go. This morning, my understanding is HSI agents, ICE agents, showed up in our community and contacted our police department because they had attempted to execute a warrant against an individual who they were targeting and seeking to detain, and that person fled from them and potentially and somehow ended up at the address on Rose Street that we were all out at today. I have shared from the beginning that our officers' job is not and never will be to enforce federal immigration policy, and that of course continues to be the case. The challenge for this, and I understand that this is hard to convey, let alone understand, the challenge for that is our officers' job is to ensure that any time fleeing from officers or a potential kind of vehicle kind of collision, anytime there's a likely conflict between two groups of people, whether they're documented or undocumented, in uniform or not, our officers' job is to be there. We got a report from those federal agents that someone had thrown rocks and bricks at them. And again, anytime there's a report in our city that anyone has thrown a brick or a rock or something like that at anyone else, it is our officers' job to be there. That's a challenging balance to hold, and I understand that for some of our community members, for some of our residents, that's a challenging balance to understand. But our officers have to be able to continue to be police officers, even when we have federal agents in our community who are intent on operating without cooperating with us, operating without working with us, operating without giving us the type of information that would be really helpful for us to best keep our community safe and stable. I want to say thank you to our paramedics and even some of our officers who worked together to ensure a couple of individuals who were there who needed medical attention immediately were able, even in the context of the rapidly evolving moment, were able to access the medical care that they needed. That was important and that was critical to be able to get done in that time. As that event was wrapping up, and as our officers were seeking to exit today, we saw a chaotic scene break out. And I have spent today hearing significant concerns from community members who are concerned that this value that we've placed for the last 8 years, and even longer than that with our St. Paul Police Department, on the trust that has to flow between our officers and our community members, may not have been upheld in the ways that we have grown to expect them in our city. You all know this. In my first 100 days as mayor, one of our top priorities was completely rewriting the use of force policies that govern our St. Paul Police Department. We did that through a two-way conversation because those use of force policies are a covenant between our officers and our residents. It can't be a one-way thing. We called that policy, and this is one of my favorite parts of it, we called that policy Officer Response to Resistance and Aggression. So right in the title, we made a distinction between how we respond to people who are aggressively resisting, being aggressive against officers, and how we respond to people who are passively or peacefully resisting an officer's command. That policy clarifies that our officers are authorized to use only the minimum amount of force that is both reasonable and necessary to secure a lawful objective. That policy makes clear that our expectation is to de-escalate situations whenever possible, to use the minimum amount of force in every single situation, and frankly, to be the epitome of discipline, even when folks around us are not. I am concerned, and I want to be very clear, I am concerned that it felt as though some of those federal agents who were there intentionally stirred the pot and intentionally created as chaotic a scene as they possibly could before they left. That said, I have to acknowledge, and I have shared with you all when I'm concerned about about some of the actions of our officers. I've shared with you all when I feel like some of those actions may have been frustrating and hard to see, but I can't, it's hard to see another way. I will share with you, I am deeply concerned about some of the complaints that I've heard today, about some of the allegations that I've heard today, and about some of the videos that I've seen today. Many people now have seen a video of a woman on a cane standing still in front of a vehicle and having pepper spray or some type of chemical irritant blasted in her face at point blank range. Many of us have seen different types of videos like that that call into question whether those values that we've lifted high of de-escalation, of minimal use of force, of maintaining that trust and maintaining that balance were upheld today. And let me tell you, one of the things that's been most critical for us from the beginning is to say that we know that anytime you set an expectation, there will be moments and there will be individuals, there will be moments where we have to wonder if we fell short of those expectations. And let me tell you, I have told you before, and I will tell you again, that I have the highest confidence in our St. Paul Police Department. I tell my team all the time that anytime we see something, some institution or some staff person or some action that we think is above critical questioning, that means we don't have confidence in it. And because I do have confidence in our police department, we have to be able to ask all of these questions, and they have to be answered with haste. I've spoken to our police chief today, and our police chief has assured me that he will be initiating a full review of any use of force exhibited by a St. Paul officer today, that we will be reviewing all of that body-worn camera footage and determining, getting to the bottom of how we perceive those use of forces that have occurred today. I want to be clear, I'm not a use of force expert. I'm somebody with concerns and somebody with questions. And that's exactly why we need someone who is a use of force expert to weigh in, to dig in, and to unfold all of these things so that we as a community can gain a full understanding of what happened today and why, and how we should calibrate our expectations moving forward. That won't be immediate. That won't be overnight. We had dozens of officers who were out there for hours today. So there is hundreds of hours of body-worn camera footage to review, to comb through, and to go through, and that'll take time. And that I know is unsatisfactory to some people at home watching. But one of the truisms is sometimes we have to choose between the fastest possible answer and the most thorough answer. We deserve a thorough answer to the concerns that we experienced today. I need to understand why the decisions were made around use of force. Frankly, starting with showing up in gas masks in the first place, including the use of chemical munitions and when those chemical irritants were used. I need to understand better what our policies and what our practices we expect to ensure that you all, the members of the media who show up to tell the public the story of what's happening in this community and our country on a day-to-day basis, that how your rights and your safety are protected, that has to be absolutely critical. I will say that I have been proud of this police department through a lot of terrible trauma, through a lot of terrible crises, through the protests and civil unrest that we experienced after the murder of George Floyd. I shared with you and will continue to believe that our police department did as good a job as any department on the planet in walking that line between protecting people's rights to peacefully protest and denying people the right to create havoc and destruction of people's properties and livelihoods in our community. That's really critical. The other thing that I'll say is, and I'll be happy to take any questions, the other thing that I'll say is this. Our police officers came today, partially in response to a concern or allegation that bricks were being thrown, rocks were being thrown, things like that were being thrown at those ICE agents. Our police officers left today with bricks and rocks and things being thrown at them. I came into this work, I got into this work to fight for a world in which nobody throws rocks and bricks or anything at anybody. And for all of my friends who agree with me when I say that it undermines our community values and it undermines our public safety, for our federal government to send agents into our community, just like we saw last week, we saw the raid at Brotex. They arrested 14 individuals, and afterwards, ICE issued a release saying that one of them had a past criminal charges, which says to me that of the 14 people they arrested, not one of them had a conviction worth putting into that statement. They showed up and created chaos, created a scene, pepper sprayed protesters, drove over some of the folks' feet in the guise of keeping us safe. And I can't figure out how them doing all of that kept us safe. And to all of my friends, to all of my constituents, to all of my residents, to all of my neighbors who agree with me when I stand up to condemn those actions, we also have to find a way to condemn those actions. We have to find a way to resist without becoming the type of people that throw rocks and bricks at other people. That's really important for our own humanity and for the world that we are saying that we're showing up to resist for, to protest for, to fight for. That's critical. That's a world that I will continue to show up with all of you for. I think that concludes my prepared remarks. I'm happy to take any questions with the understanding that this is a rapidly evolving situation. It's a chaotic scene. There's probably more questions with regard to what occurred today that I don't have the answers to at this point than the ones that I do have the answers to. Yes, sir.
Before officers deployed the so-called lead munitions and tear gas, did they get command approval to do so, and did they issue a dispersal order to the crowd before using those at the point?
That's one of the questions I want to get to the bottom of. I want to be clear. I don't understand, particularly in the morning, in front of the house, when the pepper spray, and I don't know which chemical irritant it was. So I'm just going to say pepper spray, but forgive me if that ends up being the wrong technical term. But when that pepper spray was deployed, with that whole crowd there, I don't understand why that pepper spray was deployed in that moment. That's one of the questions I need an answer to.
Did that happen? That was after the rocks and bricks were thrown?
That was after the report. That was after I heard reports of rocks and bricks and things like that being thrown. And again, I want to be clear. I don't know everything about what happened today. I'm not a use of force expert. I'm a neighbor and a community member who was on site today and witnessed some things that left me with very significant questions. And this is why I insist on hearing from the folks who are use of force experts after they do get a full accounting of everything that occurred today.
But several journalists, including one of my colleagues, were they deliberately targeted by St. Paul police, or what was the reason to hit journalists about this?
I don't have any evidence that any journalists were deliberately targeted, and frankly, that would surprise me. I think probably what happened is, and I should also say, from what I witnessed out there today, I was actually somewhat pleasantly surprised by the ability of most of the people in the crowd to maintain a sense of discipline. There were moments where we needed the crowd to help us with something, the protesters who were there to help us with something, and they did to help try to reduce the amount of harm that occurred out there. And our police officers were able to work with those protesters and with the folks who were helping to lead that, I think, in a meaningful way. It also seems, just like I said about some of those ICE agents, it also seems that there were some individuals in that space whose hope was to escalate tensions in that space, whose hope was to create a conflict. And what it appeared to me that happened, and again, I hesitate to give my opinion of what happened because I'm not an expert and I don't have all the facts yet. But I think what may have happened is that you had a couple of individuals in a crowd of, frankly, mostly somewhat disciplined folks who started taking actions that I think betrayed the trust of the community who was out there and betrayed the values that we try to leave with as a community, and created a community versus police dynamic right there. And what I imagine, and again, this is one of the questions we have to get through, because it's not acceptable for members of the press to be injured in law enforcement actions. But my expectation is that what we'll find is that we had members of the press who were in a crowd as the police department worked to try to figure out how to engage that crowd, not that anyone was specifically targeted.
Mayor, who will be conducting this use of force review? Will it be an internal police investigation?
That's a great question. Thank you. That will be some of the actions of it will be, and some of the kind of information will be collected by our police department. But it'll go to our Police Civilian Internal Affairs Review Commission, which is all civilians who work who accept kind of some of those internal affairs investigations. And they receive that information, and they end up coming back with a recommendation. They end up coming back with findings and a recommendation back to the police chief. So that's one of my invitations for community members. If you have information, like I said, we are going to conduct, the police department, our police chief has already begun conducting a full review of every use of force that was done today. If you have information that would help that review, please go to stpaul.gov, stpaul.gov/PCIARC. That's our Police Civilian Internal Affairs Review Commission. That is a group of civilians, community members, residents of this city who have been trained and who work to provide that kind of civilian level oversight. It's one of our values that when we give people the power of a badge, in an immediate sense, can feel ultimate. And so when we give people the power of the badge, it has to be backed up by civilian oversight, which is why it's our PCR who will be the ultimate kind of voice of like what the recommendations are coming out of today.
And the police chief did just put out a statement saying he doesn't believe there's any policies today, especially as it relates to the separation ordinance. So do you agree with the chief's position at this moment in time, or is it too soon to tell, knowing that you have court?
I would imagine the chief and I would agree that we had dozens of officers out there who all had hours likely of body-worn camera footage, and it's just not possible to, if I form a conclusion right now, frankly, on one side or the other, then that sort of could at least be seen to undermine the integrity of the review that I'm telling you about. I think what we need right now isn't for me to cast a judgment or isn't for me to make a declaration. I am telling anybody in this city who feels like they have concerns about what they saw today and has deep questions about what they saw today, that I too have concerns and I too have deep questions. And I, as the mayor of this city, am going to make sure that we work with our police department and with our civilian PCR, our civilian oversight committee, to ensure that those questions are answered and those concerns are resolved. And that, when we get through that process, then it'll be time for conclusions.
Mayor, do you know anything more about this federal law enforcement operation? Was it immigration related? Was it another sort of federal law enforcement operation where they might have had a warrant and it was part of a criminal investigation? What have you been?
Well, that's the problem. If they would check in with us, and they know, they've seen my press releases. By the way, just yesterday, we won our third indictment, federal indictment, against the federal administration's unconstitutional attacks on sanctuary cities. So we're proud to be able to do that. They've seen those press conferences. They've seen my statements. They know that we oppose vehemently the way they're operating in communities. They know that we abhor when they show up with masks on. They know that we abhor when they are unwilling to show a warrant or even identify themselves or show a badge. They know that we don't appreciate that. And so they don't coordinate or convey with us. What they do, what we've seen a pattern of in St. Paul and around the country, is sort of showing up, creating a chaotic scene, and then leaving. And leaving our neighbors, leaving our residents, leaving our officers, our paramedics, our community leaders, our community members to sort of navigate and manage the chaos that they create in our community. They did that on the east side today. I don't remember the question you asked me.
I was just asking if you knew what sort of operation this was.
So long story short, I believe it was likely immigration. My understanding is that there was at least some immigration component to it. I believe that there may have been some type of warrant involving one individual who was in that home. I don't know is the problem. And here's where the rub is. The federal administration keeps telling us, if you're not a violent criminal, you don't have to worry about this. But when they take an action like this, when they take an action like they did at Brotex last week, when they take an action against just a crew of roofers who were up on a roof trying to do their job, every single person they arrested at Brotex last week was some just law-abiding person trying to go to work that morning. And when they do that, and they don't tell us, oh, this is what we're doing. Oh, this is why that person was a danger to the community. This is why our community is safer, because we took this enormously destabilizing action in communities today. Then the consequence of those actions is that families who are trying to decide whether it's safe to take their children to school tomorrow don't know. The people who just want to go to work tomorrow and be a part of our community are afraid to do that. And let me say two things. One, every time I say that, somebody says, oh, well, they shouldn't have come into this country illegal or something along those lines. And I want to be clear that the people that we're talking about are people who may have overstayed a visa to finish their dissertation. They're people who may have overstayed a work visa to be able to just raise their children in a place that they love, in the only place that they know. And we want to criminalize them. Our federal government tries to criminalize people by virtue of just breathing, by virtue of just existing, by virtue of doing the exact same thing that we've seen people do for generations. Our country, I grew up in American history class and in social studies class learning that what's amazing about this country is that it's been a beacon for people who've come from all over the world. And I think maybe they didn't mean all over the world, because we've been proud of being a beacon when people who came were coming from Europe. But as the melanin content of the people who have flocked to this country has gotten thicker and thicker, then somehow immigration became something that we didn't like. Then somehow the people who sought a better life in America became criminalized in our eyes just because they sought a better life in America. So I think that's something that's important to note.
Do you know how many people maybe were arrested federally or did the St. Paul police arrest?
I don't believe the St. Paul police arrested anyone. I believe that there was maybe one, maybe two individuals who were cited by the St. Paul Police Department. My understanding is the federal agents arrested one or two people, maybe two people, but I am not an authoritative source on that because, again, they don't share that information with us.
Can you confirm what type of interference St. Paul police officers?
I can't. That's a question for our St. Paul Police Department. That's what I was saying earlier. I said pepper spray. I don't know that it was technically actually pepper spray. That's a question for our police department.
And you said earlier that the person who was being targeted by the St. Paul agents somehow ended up at this residence. So was this their home, or what is the relation there?
I don't have any of those. I don't have any of that information. Again, this is unusual because this is a situation that we woke up and found ourselves in the middle of. Somebody did that unintentionally, created that chaos for us, created that kind of those variables and these unknowns for us intentionally. So no, I don't have any of that information about what the nature of it is, whose home this was, how they ended up kind of being in that space. What I know is that we ultimately ended up called into a space. And I want to say this. And I want to respect for all of you guys' time. We have said to our community members from the beginning, and it's still true, that our police officers are not enforcers of federal immigration policy. I said this already. The line exists and the trick exists that if there's a scene that looks like it's likely to maybe get out of control, if there's a scene that looks like it could turn into a conflict between two groups of people, one of the things I've said to our police chief for a long time is I don't want any unsurprising things. If we look back on something and say we could see that was about to happen, then that was an invitation when we saw it to intervene and kind of try to prevent it from happening in the first place. So I do recognize the distinction between our officers being there at all. And I'll tell you, out at Brotex last week, I had a group of folks who were angry because the police officers weren't there trying to help enforce a free speech type of zone. And so I do recognize the distinction between having any physical presence there at all. That doesn't necessarily mean that they were in the mode of being federal immigration folks. Again, I understand that that's confusing and it's complex, and that's a line that's hard to kind of draw hard and fast because there's so many variables in how a situation like this can play out. I told you from the beginning that there's more questions that that I have more questions than answers at this point, and that continues to be the case. That's exactly why we're calling for the review. That's exactly why I've asked our police chief to comb through all of that body-worn camera footage in the way that we're calling for the chief to do it. And I look forward to being able to come on the other side of this and have the answers. In truth, you might hear those answers from another mayor. But I look forward to our community being able to stand forward and say, we are enforcing our high standards, because you better believe St. Paul has the highest standards of any police department in the country, and we are going to enforce our highest standards of transparency, our highest standards of accountability, and our highest standards of kind of community relations. Yes. Last question.
The second immigration rate of this magnitude the past week. What would you say to residents who see this as a threat to public safety? I mean, is this something they should expect at this point?
I see this as a threat to public safety. I don't know a better way to say it. I see this as a threat to public safety. And again, I have more answers about last week than I have about this week, which is why I keep referencing last week. But to see those agents pull up, to create that chaotic scene, to pepper spray a whole crowd. There was a woman who was limping because the federal vehicles ran over her toe as they were leaving. And for them to say that, you know, and look back at the release that they issued after that action. They said they arrested 14 people. And they said that one of them had an old charge. Now, these folks know well enough what the difference is between a charge and a conviction. If that person had an old conviction, they'd have said that person had an old conviction. That person didn't even one person of the 14 had an old charge that wasn't even convicted. And they want to convince us that that show that they put on, that circus they created, that chaos that they created was in the guise of public safety. When what they did was ended up rounding up 14 people who were just on their way to work, like they'd go every morning. And they created a destabilizing presence. They created harm. They created injuries in our community to do that. So this notion of criminalizing people, of dehumanizing people because of who they are, not because of something they've done. And this is what I've told you all from the beginning, is that nobody's better than our St. Paul Police Department at holding someone accountable for breaking a law. Whether you're a citizen or not, whatever your immigration status is, if you break the law, expect the St. Paul Police Department to come and have some questions for you. But we can't be in the business of doing that. One, it undermines public safety in the moment, but two, it undermines the trust. And this is what I've said from the beginning, our greatest public safety asset is the trust that our residents have to have in our police officers. That when they see that badge, when they see that uniform, that somebody's coming to help them. And that's how, when we brag on bringing gunfire down by 70% in this city, it's because people know that they can count on and work with our St. Paul Police Department. That's why we work so hard to protect and maintain that trust from anyone who would break it on any side of our community. Thank you all for being here.